Welcome to Goldfish on Games. When I bought the Delphine collection pack back in the mid-90s, I knew I was going to get at least two great games, Flashback and Another World. But the others, well, they were a bit of a lottery to be honest, because I hadn't really heard of them. But I think I struck it lucky with every single game in this box. But the one I enjoyed the most was Cruise for a Corpse. I was able to track down a complete copy for both Amiga and PC, and there seems to be a few versions of the latter, as it had an original 16 colour release and a later 256 colour edition. But they both seem to have the same music options, which to be honest isn't all that great. There was only one version for the Amiga with 32 colours, and significantly better music and audio. Now games like these are why I love big box games. Just look at all the extras in here. There were the typical catalogues you got in these boxes, but just check out this manual. It actually opens like a detective's notebook. Or the background booklet that gives you some broad information on the various characters. But what I was really wanting was this map. Just check it out. How glorious does this look? It's absolutely immense. And on top of all that, we also had a code wheel, which, to be honest, isn't a particularly great copy protection. It's really fiddly, and it's just awkward to use. And the code wheel I have for the Amiga version isn't even properly aligned, which makes using it even more difficult than it needs to be. But even that version is better than the blurry, badly photocopied version that you got in the Delphine collection. It's interesting that it seemed that making this booklet was easier than trying to break the copy protection. And can we take a moment to take a look at this box art? It's like the detective's going, you know what, I think he might be dead. I have to say I'm a bit of a fan of the original French version, that's based on the in-game logo as well as a simple painting of the ship. Interestingly, both versions came with the same number of double-sided double-density floppy disks, and both could be installed to the hard drive or played from disk. The game starts with an extremely cinematic intro that does an amazing job of setting the scene. But it doesn't take long before we find our host, Nicholas Karabujan, murdered, and even less time for us to be rendered unconscious so the body can be stolen. Some holiday this is turning out to be. The first thing that'll strike you when you wake up is the fact that the game uses nicely detailed backgrounds and these newfangled polygons to render our hero, the detective Raoul Dissontier. And what else is a detective on his holiday gonna do but work out who killed the host? And in classic murder mystery style, you have quite the number of suspects to choose from, all of whom are happy to accuse one another of being the murderer, and all have dark hidden secrets in their past. From the beginning of the game, the list of suspects is as follows: Daphne Karabujan, the daughter of Nicholas the murdered, and Mercedes, his first wife. Julio Esperanza, rich playboy and suitor to Daphne. Rebecca Karabujan, the second wife of Nicholas. Thomas Logan, solicitor to the Karabujan family. Rose Logan, Tom's wife. Dick Schmock, the long-lost son of Agnes, a rich aunt to Nicholas who recently died. Susan Plum, Agnes's best friend. Father Fabian, friend to not only the family but also Agnes and Susan. And finally, Hector the butler. It seems the only people who are not considered was the staff, who we mostly cannot interact with. And perhaps as an oversight, if you look at the map, there isn't even any quarters or rooms for them to sleep in. Interacting with the game is all done via a simple mouse interface. You can click to move around, and if the cursor changes, you can then click again to bring up a small menu. This typically gives you a few options. These tend to be related to the object in question, but not all of them will actually be useful, and some object interactions are actually context sensitive, and will change depending on what you're trying to use it with. So it's a bit of a midpoint between the classic LucasArts games with their large palette of options and modern games like Beneath the Steel Sky where you only had look and interact. and as you'd expect, you go around picking up anything that's not nailed down and try to pry up anything that is. But for the most part, what they'll do is unlock new items that you can talk about, as talking to the people on the boat will be your main way of getting new information. And you'll end up with some pretty complex dialogue trees and relationship graphs between all the various characters. More often than not, you'll interrogate one person to find out a new juicy bit of information on another that you'll then have to track them down or other characters to find out more. Which isn't always easy, as they all move around the ship depending on the time of day, as the game employs a time system where when you discover important information, find a clue or trigger a cutscene, the clock will move on. But some objects and people will only be in a location at a set time, so solve a puzzle or talk to someone in the wrong order and it's actually possible to miss an item. So remember, save often. Thankfully this doesn't seem to happen all that often, so it's not typical that you'll get completely stuck. But if you do, it usually won't be long before you'll find out that you've missed something and you can't progress. So it's not like you'll get to the end of the game and then realise you cannot complete it because you missed an object at the very beginning. Though due to the fact that these objects will come and go, you'll end up searching the same rooms multiple times hoping that this time there's something new to find. There are a number of cutscenes that will only be triggered if you enter a location via a specific direction and at a set time. This unfortunately means you cannot rely on the map to fast travel around the ship all the time, but thankfully because it's not particularly large, you can get around pretty quickly on foot. One side effect of this is the fact you'll get to know each area intimately, but the limited number of locations was actually highlighted in a number of the reviews, as they complained there wasn't much variety in the number and type of locations that you'd visit. Though personally, I quite liked the fact that it was a small setting. It allowed them to make each location quite detailed and interesting, like the upper decks of the ship, which have this great depth to them, and puts their scaling effects with the polygons to great use. I hope you like looking at French Detective's ass and man-batch, as you're going to see them very close up. And there are all sorts of little touches here and there, like Father Fabian, who doesn't like it if you try to enter his cabin without knocking first. Or the scarf that flutters every time you enter this room. The detective will do anything to get to the bottom of this case, even if it requires peeking through portholes, looking through the laundry, or even serving a drink to an alcoholic. And Raoul is a man of action, as when an attempted murder is taking place on poor Susan, he jumps to the rescue and throws a life preserver out to save her. He even has a fist fight near the end of the game, which is one of the few parts where you can actually die. The other is when you finally work out how to enter a door that you spotted right at the beginning of the game, and it just seems such a logical thing to do to try and open it up. So when death does come, it's a little bit of a shock. The music that you've been hearing in the background of this video is from the Amiga version, as there really is nothing good to say about the PC speaker or ad-lib drivers that they used for the PC version. The Roland version might have sounded better, but I don't have that card to test it out with. The Amiga version has so much more atmosphere due to not only having better sounding music, but it also has this environmental audio that really grounds the game on the ship, like the creaking or other ship sounds when there's no music, or the echoey footsteps when you're walking around down below. Even the simple act of having sound effects when you open and close a door adds to the game. The PC 256 color version mentions that it has Sound Blaster support, but there's no direct sign of it in the setup. All I can assume is that they put it on the box, as ad-lib sound is compatible with the Sound Blaster. So even with the better colour palette of the VGA version, I'd have a hard time recommending it over the Amiga version. One of the other reasons is the fact that I found interacting with objects far less fiddly, as you really have to hit some very exact targets when picking up or interacting with some objects. For some reason this is far more annoying on the PC version, and it really does trip you over when you're trying to deal with a small object that's within a bigger object. It almost makes it seem as that smaller object doesn't even exist. Before you know it, 6:30 will arrive and you have to make your choice. Who killed the host along with 2 other people? Everyone seems to have some dirty little secrets, and most seem to have a reason to want the old man dead. But only one of them is the killer, and you get to point out who you think did it at the very end of the game. Now I won't spoil the ending, but if you get it wrong, the perp is taken away by boat and the detective is left wondering if he made a mistake. If you get it right, you get to hear what happened to each of the other characters on the ship, and you then get treated to this wonderfully animated outro, which is so nicely animated and well done that you'll sort of skip over the convoluted story and the reasons that technically all make sense, but still leave you a bit of a nagging thought of, really? That was the plot? It's a pity that the sequel that was clearly being set up would never come, as next year Delphine would hit the big time with Flashback, and suddenly the point and click games went by the wayside. This really is one of those games that I wish I could scrub my memories of so I could experience it from a completely blank slate. Unfortunately, at the moment there isn't a legal way to get the game, but if you do find a copy you can either run it natively or via ScumVM, which added support not too long ago. There's also a wishlist entry on GOG, so I think we should all go and vote for it, and hopefully they will take notice. And until next time, I've been the Goldfish, that was A Killer on a Boat, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching my little video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, liking and subscribing will do wonders for this small channel. You can also check out other videos that I've done through links on the screen at the moment.